now. And Christian, what do you make of Iran's denials here? Do they have credibility or not?
Well, Greg, no, I'd say they lack credibility. There's a fairly strong money trail that leads back to Tehran from this would-be assassin. There's an account controlled by the Quds Force, which is part of the Iranian regime, the part of the regime charged with exporting the Islamist revolution. He's also related to a senior member of the Quds Force, a member who was responsible for a great many American deaths in Iraq. And also President Obama himself, the fact that he's been so clear that this is an Iranian linkage, it basically says that Obama's policy on Iraq is a failure. Remember, he took office saying we will reach out with a hand if you unclench your fist. That clearly hasn't worked. For the president to be so far out on this, well, I think is very telling.
Do you think the engagement policy, if we can call it that, by this administration has actually backfired in a way that it has emboldened Tehran?
Yes, I think so, and it comes against a pattern that frankly is bipartisan, where Iran has been pushing on an open door without any hesitation, without any resistance. Go back to the founding of the Islamic Republic in 1979. They took American diplomats hostage. They never really faced a consequence for that. They probably contributed to the killing of a number of American Marines in Beirut in 1983, kidnapped or were supporting kidnappers of Americans in Beirut throughout the 80s, and of course killed a great number of Americans through their proxies and perhaps directly in Iraq in the last decade. And Iran has never paid a consequence for any of these actions. So this is more of the same. They have a great deal of impunity.
But, you know, Christian, now let's talk about how the United States should respond. The president is talking about severely harsh sanctions. The Secretary of State is talking about crippling economic pain on Tehran. But the U.S. does virtually no business with Iran, so unilateral action would be feckless. It wouldn't have any effect. The president wants to further isolate Iran. How do we go about doing that if we will never get the cooperation of China and Russia, who are already dubious about what happened here with this plot?
That's right. That's just not going to work. You know, the president will say things like, well, we've taken nothing off the table. That used to actually mean something coming from an American president. It was sort of a mild threat, but now it no longer does. It's been used too many times without consequence. So, you know, three things we could do. We have to push back somehow. Purely defensively, we need better linkages with Mexico's military. I mean, this really has highlighted the threat that comes from Mexican drug cartels, and we ought to have military-to-military cooperation and a joint command. But more offensively, the Saudis are the aggrieved party here. It was their ambassador who was targeted. So we should work with them, frankly, to retaliate, to target members of the Iranian regime, perhaps mostly in Iraq, where they are once again trying to stir up trouble, and also to wage political warfare broadly against the Iranian regime, both within their borders and around the globe.
Can we do that? I mean, how do we go about doing that?
Unfortunately, our capabilities are badly atrophied. The CIA got out of the business of influencing political outcomes a long time ago. Our National Endowment for Democracy, that's supposed to be on the front line of supporting democratic dissidents, has become feckless and ineffective as well. But we can bring back these capabilities. We had them as recently as the end of the Cold War, where even when we were negotiating with the Soviet Union, we were very clear that we wanted the end of that tyrannical regime. Likewise, we talk a lot about the Iranian nuclear threat, and it's a real threat, a growing threat. But their political activities, their subversion of friendly government and of democratic forces, their attempts to spread Islamism, that's the real threat. And pushing back against that by supporting the Green Movement covertly if necessary, and trying to undermine them economically elsewhere around the world to the best that we can. Also, you know, the Chinese and the Russians may not be in a cooperative mood, but we should at least try. We've supposedly had this wonderful improvement of relations with Russia and China, so let's try and call them out on that.
Christian Whiton, former senior State Department official, thanks very much for being with us.
Thank you, Greg.
Heather?
The Vietnam War Memorial in Washington